Our thinking on this topic is too three-dimensional. When trying to understand God, we have a tendency to look inwardly toward our own abilities, but if we don't let the Bible decide when that's appropriate, we're going to get this one wrong. As far as we know, computer programming is the current pinnacle of human ingenuity. The possibilities for what we can accomplish with it seem to be limitless. We give our programs a body and design them to perform whatever task we wish. We have even started giving them vessels that appear to be human enough, and they are at the whim of their creators until such a time as they reach full autonomy. Until then, if a machine is involved with an incident that happens to be unlawful, there's no way to hold the machine accountable. Whatever human being is in control of the machine would be the person culpable for the unlawful act. That much is obvious, but now I'm going to explain why that is not a good analogy to describe the relationship between mankind and his creator if God predetermined everything that takes place.
Yes, sir. Reading you loud and clear.
Humans design and create robots out of materials that are already available to them in their reality. Their creations can then only go on to affect things within that same plane of existence. We'll call this the material plane. We know from the Bible that there's another plane of existence just outside of our reach, which our creations cannot affect in any way. We'll call this the spiritual plane. And even above this is where God resides, a place that Isaiah calls eternity. In this place, if it can even be called a place, time and space are both merely constructs for God to use as He sees fit. He created both of these lower planes of existence and can manipulate them in any way that He desires, because there is no law coming down to Him from a higher plane of existence. There is no such place. When God predetermines that an evil action will take place in the material plane, He does so with the intention of using it to glorify Himself. There is no better example of this than the murder of Jesus Christ Himself, objectively the most evil action to ever take place. And God tells us in no uncertain terms that this was His plan of salvation from before He even began to create. In the book of Acts, Luke specifically states that God gathered the people together to commit the evil against Jesus that God had determined beforehand to be done to Him. Of those mentioned in Acts chapter 4 that were gathered together by God to do these things to Jesus was Pontius Pilate. And Luke actually gives us the most detail about Pontius Pilate's interaction with Jesus in chapter 23 of his gospel. He shows that Pontius Pilate did everything that he could think of to do to get out of crucifying Jesus. He saw no fault with Him and didn't want to do it. He was terrified, but he couldn't get around it. It's what God had determined for him to do. This does not make Pontius Pilate a robot, but rather a character in God's story. Psalm 139:16 confirms this line of reasoning, as it says that God's book contains all of the days that were fashioned for us. Paul would go on to explain in Romans chapter 9 that the moral of each individual character's story, each vessel, is either to the end of the praise of God's glorious grace, or to the display of His justice and His wrath.